Many Gen Z and millennial voters are angry. Not all of them, but those who are furious. You see it on college campuses,
University of Michigan graduates disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters.
on social media,
Yeah, you have no right, none, to demand that somebody be okay with that, that somebody vote for that.
and in protests on the street. And so much of that anger has been over the crisis in Gaza.
Free Palestine!
For Arab and Muslim Americans, this all began with the start of the war, and it's gone from personal to political and back again. Getting lawmakers and officials to listen to their frustration and anger has often felt like screaming into the void. But giving up to make a change wasn't an option. Giving up meant accepting that tens of thousands of lives would continue to be lost. And not only did they force elected officials to listen, but they made history.
President Biden and Donald Trump both emerged victorious from their respective primaries in Michigan last night. And while Biden won yesterday's Democratic contest, more than 100,000 people voted uncommitted to protest his support of Israel's war in Gaza.
So how did this movement make enough noise for the Democratic Party to finally hear them? Today, we're going to look at what became known as the Uncommitted Movement and its impact already this election cycle. We'll also talk about the potential influence on election night in November. This is What the Vote, a podcast about the issues that are important to Gen Z voters. I'm Sina Isa. The Uncommitted Movement began right here in Michigan. It started as Listen to Michigan and is now known nationally as the Uncommitted National Movement. It was a desperate plea from pro-Palestinian voters seeking to be heard.
We launched on February 6th, and Michigan's primary was February 27th.
This is Layla Alabed. She's a key organizer of the Uncommitted Movement. She's also the sister of Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American serving in Congress.
So in those short 3 weeks, with only a modest budget of $200,000, we grew a very grassroots campaign that was multi-generational, multicultural, multiracial.
She says Democratic organizers who are Arab American and anti-war started talking about putting together a coalition around a protest vote.
And that kind of kick-started the campaign to Listen to Michigan, Vote Uncommitted, and we were able to earn over 101,000 uncommitted votes across the state of Michigan.
It was originally intended for Michigan voters to go uncommitted in the February Democratic primary, but the movement quickly spread across the nation, amassing over 600,000 votes in various states.
Minnesota Democrats sent President Biden a message with Tuesday's primary election results. Nearly 20% of them voted uncommitted.
One thing you'll see in last night's primary results, vote counts for uncommitted.
Writing in, or in Connecticut's case, bubbling in, uncommitted on their ballots.
You know, I think what I heard was disillusionment, this like not voting for the lesser of two evils. Even some folks that were saying, you know, we want to teach the Democratic Party a lesson.
Lexi Zaydan is also part of the leadership of the Uncommitted Movement.
That the Democratic Party can't say like vote blue no matter who, that they can't say, well, I'm not Donald Trump for vote, so vote for me, while literally taking my tax dollars and funding, you know, bombs that are dropping on innocent lives.
We honestly, to be totally honest with you, we didn't think that our campaign would go beyond Michigan's primary. But then very quickly after we launched our campaign, we saw it grow like wildfire in other states that also started to launch their own uncommitted campaigns.
But the movement still has its roots in Michigan, with the largest share of uncommitted votes. This is significant because Biden won Michigan against Donald Trump in 2020 by about 150,000 votes, which means if everyone who voted uncommitted in the primary votes against Vice President Harris, it could present a problem for her.
In Michigan, you need the Arab American and Muslim American vote in order to win your pathway to the White House. And I think for us, we feel a deep betrayal, not just by this administration, but also by the Democratic Party.
We invested in them. We believed in them. They promised us these things. They betrayed us. It was a lot of hurt being an Arab American, being Palestinian American, but also feeling less American because you're seeing your people being dehumanized every single day.
The original strategy behind the movement was to show Biden that he was in serious trouble come November. But now he's out of the race, in part because of pressure from uncommitted voters.
With support from Democrats eroding by the day, President Biden says he's dropping out of the presidential race and endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be his party's nominee.
Nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
For many Democratic-leaning voters, this moment right here felt like a win.
It absolutely did. And this reality that, like, in a moment where we all could have backed down, in a moment where people could have remained disillusioned, we used our anger and our frustration in a way that did result in a win for the movement.
What uncommitted voters wanted was a candidate who reflected their opposition to the U.S. support of the war in Gaza. They wanted someone who would listen when they called for a ceasefire, or at the very least an arms embargo.
I think the door of hope is cracked open, where I think it was securely closed under President Biden.
Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud is an established Democrat. He's been vocal about his disapproval of the current administration's handling of the war in Gaza. However, he was optimistic about the shift at the top of the ticket. I spoke with Mayor Hammoud right after Harris announced she was running for president, before the Democratic National Convention.
I think for many of us, we're waiting to see what the policy platform is that Vice President Harris puts forth, given that she's the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. And more than anything, we believe there will be an ushering of transformative domestic policy, but we really want to see that change and that pivot. The center of the party has moved on the issue of Palestine and Israel, and we'd like a Democratic nominee to reflect that pivot of the party as well.
Since this interview, Mayor Hammoud's views have changed, or at least shifted. We'll get back to that in a bit. That's after the break. Even though there are Democrats like Mayor Hammoud who want to see something different from Harris, her remarks at the DNC reflected views nearly identical to President Biden's stance on the war.
With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done.
That's Kamala Harris accepting the party's nomination at the DNC in August.
What has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost.
So I was very optimistic in the beginning. There was some glimmer of hope, especially when the messaging of Gaza was being presented at the DNC.
Rima Mohammed is a trustee on the Ann Arbor Board of Education and one of 2 delegates at the DNC to represent people who voted uncommitted in the primary. She's also part of a group of delegates and party insiders that was hoping Arab Americans would have a larger presence on the DNC stage. She points out that even though 10,000 Democrats had requested American Palestinians to speak, they were denied.
And for us to find out Wednesday night that the DNC will not feature a Palestinian American speak from the DNC floor, even for 2 minutes, even for 5 minutes. I personally felt that my life, me as a U.S. citizen, a proud Democrat, didn't matter. I was very happy to see that the DNC allowed for families of Israeli hostages.
Hirsch's left forearm, his dominant arm, was blown off before he was loaded onto a pickup truck and stolen from his life and me and John into Gaza.
You know, this 23-year-old boy that was, or man that was there, and the family in tears.
Since then, we live on another planet. Anyone who is a parent or has had a parent can try to imagine the anguish and misery that John and I and all the hostage families are enduring.
Their experience, their pain should be shared on the stage.
But Rima says the same opportunity to share in grief and pain wasn't given to Palestinian Americans by the DNC.
Some of the reactions were, this is truly silencing the Palestinian American voice. This is somewhat considered racism. Anti-Palestinian racism is real.
Like any community of voters, Arab American voters and young voters aren't a monolith, meaning to say everyone has their own concerns and top priorities when they go into the voting booth. I spoke to Arab American voters who are considering their own conservative values and positions when voting, and Trump appeals to them. I spoke to Hassan Jafar, a guy I randomly met outside of a coffee shop in Dearborn.
November or not? I was going to vote for Trump anyway. Really? Yes. Even though you're independent? Yes. Because he was the best president, in the last 4 years. He was good. He was good? Yeah. Remember, the economy was running, smooth, everything was affordable, the houses, everything. He's crazy, he say a lot of stupid stuff. But overall, as a president? Yeah, he's better. He's way better than all the, Biden at least, or anybody.
And he's not alone. Hamtramck is a city with the highest percentage of immigrants in Michigan and an all-Muslim city council. The mayor, Amr Ghalib, is the first Arab American and first Muslim to lead the city, and he recently announced his support for Trump, saying that Trump is a man of principles. Meanwhile, Trump said in an interview with Breitbart that Ghalib endorsed him because, quote, there were no wars when he was president, which isn't true. But what I've heard from many Arab American voters is that Biden's support of a war right now is worse than Trump's hypothetical war if he becomes president. But it's important to remember what Trump did do while he was in office. Trump ordered a drone strike that killed Iran's top commander, Qasem Soleimani, which really raised tensions.
Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over.
He also supported Saudi Arabia's continued violence against Yemen, which has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people.
President Trump vetoed a bill Tuesday that would have ended the United States' role in Yemen's civil war.
We protect Saudi Arabia. Would you say they're rich? And I love the king, King Solomon, but I said, King, we're protecting you. You might not be there for 2 weeks without us.
And we have to talk about Trump's travel ban. In January 2017, President Trump issued a Muslim travel ban that Biden rescinded in 2021. This was an executive order that banned travel to the United States for 90 days from 7 predominantly Muslim countries: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, and suspended the resettlement of all Syrian refugees. It's important to recognize that many Arab Americans who live here in the United States came here or their families came here seeking asylum, so the travel ban ended that ability for many more people.
We know what Donald Trump stands for. Donald Trump stands for a renewed and amplified Muslim ban. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He annexed the Golan Heights. He ended all humanitarian aid funding for Palestinian refugees, just about the entirety of his term. So he is dangerous.
This is Mayor Abdullah Hammoud again. I sat back down with him after Israel began its escalation of violence in Lebanon. Mayor Hammoud is Lebanese American. He has family in parts of the country that have been most affected by the expanding war. He played messages for me from family who are stuck, no resources, no way to escape the bombings. And a large part of his community in Dearborn have similar stories from family in Lebanon.
First off, I just want to send my condolences. I just want to ask how you've been and
How have you been taking the news recently?
Thank you for that. I think for many of us right now, almost on a daily basis, we're seeing a flyer for another funeral. Obviously, the first Lebanese American citizen that died was a Dearborn resident. I think the most appalling thing was when the White House administration first learned about this, their reaction was to deny that he was a citizen to begin with.
You said that they're denying that Dearborn residents are being killed overseas?
When the Hashkem Jawad was killed, and he's an American citizen, Matthew Miller stepped to the podium and denied and said, no, he's not an American citizen, he's a visa holder, only to issue a written statement later clarifying that they were in fact wrong and he is in fact a citizen. But the reality is the dehumanization continues. You lessen the pain by denying somebody's citizenship, that he wasn't an American or wasn't as equal as American as anybody else was. And I think that's been the problem for the last 11 months. It seemed to say that there's two types of deaths, those of American citizens and those of non-American citizens. And even then, it seems like there's a hierarchy. If you're an Arab or Muslim American citizen, it also doesn't matter as much that you're expendable. And the way in which you die, the way they talk about it, it's as if a natural disaster came through Lebanon and that it wasn't an Israeli jet.
So the Uncommitted Committee said they are not endorsing Kamala, and they are not for a Trump presidency.
Correct.
And they're also not for a third party. So where do we go?
I can tell you, based on my conversation with residents and my constituents, people have diverging opinions. There was an op-ed today arguing that we absolutely cannot have Trump, therefore we must vote for Harris. There are people I've spoken with who said you can't have neither Trump nor Harris, you must vote third party. I think the largest voting bloc, however, are going to be those who sit at home, because apathy is growing, discontent is brewing, and people feel betrayed by all.
So as I drive through the streets of Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, I see a bunch of Trump signs in the front lawns.
I haven't seen the Trump signs you've seen.
I'm there everywhere.
Yeah, Dearborn, historically speaking, is about 65-35, 65% Dem, 35% Republican. So you always have to keep that in mind. Like, that is the baseline for a Republican candidate, Democratic candidate. Do I think that there's a large movement brewing to support Donald Trump? Absolutely not. This is somebody who has come out and also said that Israel needs to finish the job. Even the conservative constituents that I have expressed their disdain for Donald Trump. So I don't think you're going to see anything out of the normal for who supports Republican candidate across our city. What people are hearing now is for 20 years, this community has not had alignment with any president on global issues, whether it was Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, or the future president to assume the office. We will not have alignment. And we've always voted on these issues as secondary. What the community is demanding now is secondary is no longer an option.
Okay, who's the perfect candidate for you? In your lifetime, who would you like to see?
The candidate throughout my lifetime in which I had most alignment with was who we refer to as our Jewish uncle, Bernie Sanders. And it's because he is somebody who had he was not a war hawk, wasn't a neocon. I think that was the candidate that we missed out on as Americans, frankly. And so, who is it in the future? Who is this ideal candidate? I don't know. Ultimately, the question you're asking is what's going to happen come November 5th, and when I walk into that voting booth. I don't know. I really don't know.
There's this idea that keeps coming up with people I talk to heading into the election. It's like choosing between the lesser of two evils. Many people, like Haura and Miyahi, who I met at a protest right outside of a Biden rally, aren't going to vote at all.
As a Gen Z voter, I'm actually not trying to vote at all. I don't believe in the current candidates that are running. I feel like we have no hope either way. Trump, during his presidency, was also complicit in genocide. So to say that to pick the lesser of evils is not the way that Gen Z is about to go on this.
Even so, the Uncommitted Movement activated a group of young voters in a new and different way. It's part of what drives the organizers still, even beyond the primary. Again, here's Layla Alabed.
Uncommitted provided an option for folks who otherwise would have stayed home because, it's very hard, especially for Michigan voters there's a large Arab American, Muslim American population here. that cannot, vote for one president that tries to ban our homelands, and then the other president who is complicit in, killing of thousands of Palestinians, and not only that, but complicit in the American-funded bombing that happens in South Lebanon. So it had been incredibly hard. Like, even for myself, I really did not know how I was going to, prior to Uncommitted, I didn't even know where I was going to go with Michigan's presidential primary.
As of right now, the Uncommitted Movement says they cannot endorse Vice President Harris, but they do oppose a Donald Trump presidency. They believe he will accelerate the killing in the Middle East.
But the reality is that it can get worse. Nobody wants a Trump presidency more than Netanyahu, because that is his ticket to wiping Palestine off the map. Under Trump.
Lastly, they are not recommending a third-party vote in the presidential election, especially since third-party votes in key swing states could inadvertently deliver a Trump presidency.
Who will be elected in November is clear. It's Trump or it's Harris. And we have to orient less towards who is the better candidate and more towards what is the better anti-war approach in building our collective power. It's clear Netanyahu will be doing everything in his power to get Trump elected. And we have to do everything in our power to stop him.
I have to say, it's really unsatisfying leaving the story here. We don't know what's going to happen with this election, with the movement, or with the war. But we do know this. This form of political action through the Uncommitted campaign, using your vote as an organized protest, is here to stay for many Arab Americans and anti-war voters. This has been What the Vote. I'm Zina Isa. If you're just tuning in, we've got a whole bunch of episodes about what matters to Gen Z this election. You can find those in the Michigan Public Presents feed. What the Vote is a production of Stateside on Michigan Public. This episode was reported by me, Zina Isa. It was edited and mixed by Laura Weber Davis. What the Vote's editors are Brett Dahlberg, Laura Weber Davis, and April Van Buren. Other reporters on the project include Kaloli Bat, Aaron Bush, Ethan Myers, Adan Kwan, and Yesenia Zamora Cardoso. Thanks to Jody Westrick and Paulette Parker for their digital expertise. And thanks to you for listening.